The Game Boy Color, one of Nintendo's highest selling consoles ever.
America the beautiful Game Boy Color. Get into it.
I really didn't get to enjoy the Game Boy Color as much growing up because I got its tail end of its life, then its predecessor, the Game Boy Advance, was born.
Game Boy Advance, more games, more fun. Rated E for everyone.
Have you seen my shorts?
Being one of my favorite handhelds of all time. Ever since I started my modding business, Jayboy Retro, I've always wanted to build my ultimate Game Boy Color. And I did just that. Okay, the things I needed for this project was an IPS screen, and of course, I got a cheap knockoff Funny Playing Q5 IPS screen from AliExpress. Actually, a lot of the things I got for this project were from AliExpress, and I'll link those down below. The next thing I needed was a pre-cut IPS ready shell. If you guys didn't know, the IPS screens are a lot bigger than the original, so you would have to do cuts and trims to the original shell. So there's pre-made shells that fit these new screens. So of course I wanted to make my life easier. And the color palette we went with was a solid black front plate and a clear red shell back plate. I wanted to do a two-tone Game Boy Color and it looks clean. So of course we added red buttons to match the color scheme. I also wanted to boost the audio on the Game Boy Color because the Game Boy Color speaker was very lackluster, so I wanted to boost it. So I bought a very inexpensive audio amp from AliExpress. I also got this really cheap red speaker from AliExpress, but more on that thing later. I also wanted to add USB-C charging to the Game Boy Color to make it more modern in today's society. So I did just that, but boy, was that thing complicated. I had to use this very tiny charging board with this very tiny USB-C connector. And to add with that, I got a lithium battery from the Retro Repair Shop because it was the only battery size I could find proper for the Game Boy Color. So to add to the ultimate Game Boy Color, I wanted to add something cool to the buttons. So it was either the LED mods that you see everywhere, or this cool thing I saw on Reddit that makes the buttons feel tactical like the Game Boy Advance SP, where they had like that very tactical press. So I went with the tactical press mod by Froggo, shout outs to you. I think I bought his from Etsy, I will link it down below. So we added a tactical button to the Game Boy Color. And of course, we got a janked Game Boy Color from Sendico. Now I can show you the struggles I had with building this ultimate Game Boy Color. One of the first things I actually noticed with the Game Boy Color were the buttons weren't actually working. Nothing was working, anything I pressed didn't work. So of course there was the first thing we needed to fix. So I was praying and hoping that it was just battery corrosion covering the button pads. So we opened it up and yep, it's exactly what it was. Easy fix, nothing with a little isopropyl alcohol and a Q-tip couldn't fix. The next thing I wanted to accomplish was taking out the DC port, the speaker, and the battery contacts. And I gotta tell you, it was one of the most time-consuming things out of the entire build. Why? I didn't have this thing. If you don't know what this thing is, it's a solder sucker. What this thing basically does, you just heat up the solder and push this, and it sucks up all the solder. So I didn't have that. So I used solder wick and finessing to get all these parts out of the Game Boy board. Especially the battery contacts. That thing took a lot of finagling and hope to get these damn things out. I was so close to burning myself with the soldering iron. But once I did, I got to continue this project. And I want to disclaimer and please note, a lot of the camera angles in these videos of me building the Game Boy Color were terrible. I'm still new to this and I don't have the proper equipment, so please bear with me. Okay, I actually skipped a lot of parts building this thing. I didn't record a lot because I was taking a long time to find the proper video on how to do a USB-C charging mod. And for the life of me, I could not find a single proper video for my mod in particular. So I found this 60-second video from jayboymodz. Yes, I learned this tutorial from a YouTube short. Shout out to Jayboys, you helped me out a lot on this one. So after I got that DC port out, I added wires to pads 2 and 3. Don't ask me why I added wires to it. That's what he did in the video, so I just copied and pasted. And then I soldered wires to the pads where the battery contacts were at to make contact with the actual charging board. And I didn't show this part of me drilling a USB-C hole in the Game Boy Color shell itself because it was terrible. I did a really bad job. If you look at it now, it doesn't look that bad, but before I put the USB-C connector in there, it looked so bad. And I added a bunch of hot glue to stabilize the USB-C board from moving around, and yeah, I added way too much hot glue. I was just so nervous. I was like, oh my god, this thing is not gonna stay. And yeah, I overdid it with hot glue. You can even see in the video, it's bad. It's a lot of hot glue. So after I got everything set and ready to go, I actually kind of wanted to test to see if this thing got power. So I soldered the cables from the battery contact to the charging board and the lithium battery to the charging board. And I flicked the switch and we got power. I was actually surprised. First time ever doing this, not knowing anything about circuitry, how boards work, how power works. It turned on and I was like, okay. I was surprised, so I was more comfortable with moving on with the rest of the mods. The next thing I installed was Froggo's tactical buttons for the Game Boy Color, which was pretty much a straightforward mod. He has a beautiful tutorial on how to do it, super easy. This thing took me less than probably 6 minutes. Thank you, shout out to Froggo again. This thing is clean and super easy. I mean, it was dope. After that, we moved on to the audio amp that I got from AliExpress. It was a pretty cheap little board, very simple, straight through, followed a tutorial, and it was an easy install. That one took me like 5 minutes. It wasn't that hard at all. But you guys remember that janky red speaker I got from AliExpress? Yeah, that thing didn't work. That thing was so cheap, but I can't complain, and I spent only 99 cents on that speaker. But I used the original, and I was completely fine with it. It sounded perfect. Now that everything is coming together, all we need to do is install the screen. And to be honest with you, this isn't my first time installing an IPS screen to the Game Boy Color, so it's pretty straightforward for me. The only problems I have with is usually getting solder into the vias for the start and select. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys have the same problem. It's not hard, it's just tedious because they're very tiny little pads, and sometimes the solder doesn't connect with that pad. But I got it going, and we just put everything back together. So once I got everything screwed up, we had to connect everything to the charging board. So we had to connect the USB-C connector, the battery contacts, and the lithium battery to the charging board. So once I did that, boom, I got actual power. I was like, what? I actually got power again. Screen turned on. I was like, we are on the home stretch. It's over. It's done. We're finished. But once I put a Game Boy Color game in, it did not read. And all my Game Boy Color games are clean and they did not want to read. So I was like, something is definitely wrong. I don't know what's wrong with it, but I opened up the Game Boy Color again and I noticed there was a scuff on the base of the Game Boy cart reader. So all I had to do was sand that down and screw everything back together, and the Game Boy Color read games again and everything was whole. USB-C charging was working. The power turned on, the screen looked fine. This is a tactile button test, so I'm going to show you what it sounds like without tactile. This is another Game Boy I have. And here is the tactile buttons. I actually don't know if you can hear that, but that's the tactile button. This Game Boy Color is so beautiful. I wish my 6-year-old self can see this Game Boy Color, because I did own a Game Boy Color. I just didn't play as much because the Game Boy Advance was born after that. So I wish my 6-year-old self can see how beautiful this Game Boy Color is. It is clean. And I know what you're gonna say. What happened to the Shadow the Hedgehog sticker on the front of the Game Boy Color? Well, I took that out. I thought it looked cool at first because it was a very shadow color scheme. I just didn't like it, so I took it out. But let me know what you guys think. Should I have kept that shadow sticker on the shell? Let me know, I'm curious. I just think it looks fine and clean, plain. But that pretty much wraps up me building my ultimate Game Boy Color, and this thing is a beast. I get to grind all the Game Boy Color games I want thanks to this Game Boy Color ROM cart that I got from AliExpress for cheap. Link down below. I'm just gonna help you guys out. But comment down below what Game Boy Color games you guys recommend me to play, because I don't have a lot of experience with those games. The current games that I'm playing right now are almost done with Bomberman Blue, I believe it's called, and I grew up playing Toy Story 2, so I started playing that one as well. But let me know, I'm curious of what games you guys think I should be grinding. Also, let me know if you guys want me to make more videos like this. I actually enjoyed it. This is my first time doing all this kinds of stuff, so I'm new to it, so you guys have to bear with me, but you know, it takes practice, it will become better. Just let me know. Make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe. I'll see you guys in the next video. Peace.